this is JBJ and welcome to the Cake PHP tutorial part 2 about databases. In this video we'll be doing a lot more than just looking at databases. We'll first start off by exploring the directory structure of Cake PHP. In the previous video we installed Cake PHP, we got a small introduction. So what we have now is just a basic Cake PHP project. It's empty, it's just as they ship it. And if you've looked around in the directory, you see there's a lot of different folders. So we'll just have a quick peek at those, try and get an overview of what they actually stand for and what kind of content they will hold. After that, we're going to create a test database, or not as much a test database as the actual database for this application. We will then see how Cake easily can create prototype code, and this is a key example on how Cake can really fasten your development. We'll then write our very first line of Cake PHP code. So this is a very exciting video with a lot of ground to cover. But before we get started, I'd like to point out that Cake has naming conventions. Now, what enables Cake to be this powerful is actually these very, very strict naming conventions. A good example is that whenever we are creating models, they need to be in singular, like a user, and whenever we are creating database tables, they should be plural, like users. Now there's a lot of extra rules. For instance, models should actually start with an uppercase, like all classes, and in database tables we would use underscores and not camel case. But we'll get into that as we start writing it. I just want to point it out right now that when you are writing Cake PHP code, you really have to watch out how you name things. There's a certain rule of how you should name your things, and it's very important in order for Cake to give you all these extra features that it does. So what I have here is the project we created in the previous video. If you recall, I named mine Cake PHP YouTube. That's what we have right here. Then I named the project itself Bookmarker. So this application is a bookmarker application where a user can bookmark certain pages. We have all these different folders, and I'll quickly go through each one, just give a very brief description. Now this bin folder, it will hold something called Cake executables. We'll not worry too much about that one. The config folder, it has these configuration files, and we will actually use one of these shortly. The log will contain logs. We can insert something called plugins here, and we'll get into those in another video. Now the source is actually the code itself. You can see here we have the controller, models, and the views. We also have some shells and templates, but the controller, model, and the view is the real meat of the application. So they will go into these folders. We also have a test folder if we want to write tests, because Cake PHP does support unit tests. We have a TMP folder, and TMP stands for temporary, so Cake will store temporary data in this folder. We have a vendor, and this is all the dependencies we have. If you remember, Composer was a dependency manager, so Composer is actually the one managing this for us. Then we have the rep root, and this is the public document root of our application. So everything we want to be reachable by the public, we would put into this folder. That was just a very quick overview of the structure, but it'll make a lot more sense once we get started. But I just thought it might be good to know just a little about the structure and why it is as it is. The next thing we are going to do is create the database. So here I have brought up my database manager. I am running MAMP on my Mac. If you have a Mac, you probably have that program or something similar. If you're on Windows, you might have XAMPP or WAMP. It doesn't matter. Just open up your database manager and create a new database. The database I am creating is for the application. So I have one application, I'll have one database. I will call this my Cake YouTube DB for database. You can name yours whatever you want. It says we have no tables in this database, and that makes sense because it is brand new. So I will go into the SQL, and then I will paste in a lot of SQL code. Now, this is creating a total of 4 tables. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this, and I will provide this SQL in the video description below. But let's just have a quick peek. Just update my manager, and we can see they appear here on the left. So the first one I'll go through is the users. So we have a users table, so our application can have registered users. We have an ID as a primary key, makes sense. That's an auto increment. Then we have email, password. That's all the information we want from our users. Then we have a created and a modified date time table. Pretty straightforward. We then have bookmarks. Now bookmarks are, well, if you just think of your browser, you can bookmark certain pages, and that's essentially what we're making here in a simplified version. So we have a user ID, so that this bookmark will belong to one user. It has a title, a description, an URL, and a created and modified as well. So this table makes sense. It's very straightforward. So we could have an URL like Google, and we could say as a description, this is the most popular search engine, and the title could just be Google. We could then link it to a specific user and say, well, this user has bookmarked the Google page. That's how the application works. And as an extra twist, we have something called tags. Now, tags are like categories. So you can apply tags to a bookmark. So a tag has an ID, like everything else. It has a title, and a created and modified. Now, the link between the bookmarks and the tags is maintained through this bookmarks tags table. And all it has is a bookmark ID and a tag ID. And this is because we have a many-to-many relationship. The overall structure is easy enough to understand. You have a user can have bookmarks, and bookmarks can have many tags, and one tag can also have many bookmarks. Now, the bookmarks tags table is responsible for linking these two tables together. And if we explore this further, we can see that the cake naming conventions are really important here. All the tables are plural, users, tags, bookmarks, and the joining table will be one table underscore the other table, and it will contain ID for both of them. This is also a joint primary key, so that means that no bookmark can have the same tag twice, and vice versa. So this is our database. Now that we have created a database using CakePHP naming conventions, we can go ahead and do something incredibly awesome. We can create something called scaffolding code or prototyping code. So now that we have created our database, we need to link CakePHP to the database. In this config folder, there's a file called app.php. If you open that one up, scroll down a bit, you'll find that there's this data sources array. The data sources array will contain the information to connect to our database using the username, password, database supplied right here. So if we exchange this to be our database information, I'm just using root and root while on this testing environment, and the database itself I named Cake YouTube DB. And that's it. Now CakePHP should know how to connect to the database. And there's an easy way to test that. So here I have the console. I have navigated into the bookmarker folder, and you can see that I have the bin, the composer.json, and the source, all the other files. So I am inside my project directory right now. So I can make the bin/cake server. I run this and it starts up the server. What I can then do is fire up the browser at this URL, like we did in the previous video, and see if my application can connect to the database. And if I scroll down, we can see that CakePHP is able to connect to the database. So that's great. If your application looks like this, then you're good to go. It might say something about a salt, but don't worry about that one. But it should look like this, and should say that you're able to connect to the database. So now that we know Cake can actually connect to the database, we can do something very, very powerful. We can make prototyping code. So I'm gonna write bin/cake bake all users. Oh, before I do that, I just have to close the server. You can see you can exit with Control-C. So we just have to exit like that before we can give other commands. So now I can write bin/cake bake all users. It did a lot of things. Let's not worry too much about that. Let's just do it one more time. Bin/cake bake all bookmarks. Now, you probably see a pattern here. Bin/cake bake all tags. Now, the pattern here is that I have run this command, the bin/cake bake all, and then the name of our database tables. The users, the bookmarks, and the tags. I don't do anything for the joining table, the bookmarks tags, because Cake will figure this out automatically. What I've done now is actually make a prototyping application. By doing this, Cake has created a web application where we can maintain data in our database. It's that simple. Let's see how it works. So first we start up the server again, bin cake server, and once the server is live, we'll just copy this URL, paste it up into the browser, and write /bookmarks. And there we go. The bookmarks is the name of our application, so that's why we write that. The bookmarks is the name of our application, so we're essentially just opening up the server and going into that directory. And now we get this web view, and out here we can create new bookmarks, we can list users, create new users, list tags, and create new tags. Now I will just create a user. Just write test and give it an easy password. I'll submit this and the user has been saved. Now you can go into the database and verify that the user actually does exist. Because he does. It is that easy. We have created a user now. And we can create more users, we can create new bookmarks, and we can link it all together. But I'll leave that to you to play around with this. Suffice it to say that by sticking to the Cake naming conventions and then baking the application, we actually get all of this functionality where we can easily manipulate with our database. We can insert data, delete it, edit it, view it, and all the relationships between the users and the bookmarks. You can see a bookmark, he belongs to user with ID 1. So you can see all the relationships are already there because we created our database by adhering to the CakePHP conventions. So this is powerful stuff. But I'll leave it to you to play around with this. Just try and create, at minimum, create a user and a bookmark and a tag and try and link it all together. Then go into the database and see that it's actually working. And to conclude this video, I did promise that we were going to write our first line of CakePHP code. And we haven't done that yet. We've used a lot of cake stuff, a lot of automatic baking, but we haven't actually written code. If we go into the source folder and into the model, we have 3 different folders. The entity folder is what represents one single entity. The table will represent the table or the collection of the entities. So if we expand the table, we have a bookmarks, tags, and users table. So they represent the grouping, the table itself, whereas the entity represents a single entity, like a single user. If you create a user and you look in the database, you might stumble upon the fact that the password is not encrypted. Obviously, this is bad and we should correct this. So let's open up the users table or the users class. Now all this is just some Cake stuff. Cake actually makes all of this for us, but we will just create another method. It's a protected method. We will start with an underscore, call it set password. It takes a value as a parameter. And this is a setter method for the password column. Whenever the password is set on a user, it will go through this method. So because our column is named password, and because we named this set, we started with an underscore, we also see that the CakePHP naming convention is very important to adhere to. So if we stick with this naming convention, this method will be called every time we set a user's password. So that means every time we create a user or we edit him and give him a new password. So when we do this, we want to hash the password. So we'll create a hasher, and CakePHP has a default password hasher, and we can just return the hashes hash on the value. The value is the password itself. So if we create a new user with password ABC, value will be ABC. We create our hasher and it has a hash method. It's using the bcrypt by default. You can change this if you want to. We supply the value and it will hash up this value and return it. Now the returned value is the value that's actually going to be stored in the database. And we can just quickly see this in action. Just fire up our viewer here and we list all our users. We can see the password is not encrypted here. So we try to edit it. Just throw on one more character, submit it, and now we can see the password has been encrypted. Obviously we have some layout issues here, but not to worry. It's easy to see that the password is now encrypted. So whenever we set the password to a new value, it went through this new method and hashed the password. I will conclude the video here. It was a bit long. There was a lot of stuff going on. We learned about naming conventions, we created a database, we baked a prototype of our application, and we wrote our first CakePHP code. At this point you might feel a bit overwhelmed. This is perfectly normal because CakePHP has a high learning curve, and especially in the beginning. We are learning a lot of new things and some of them might seem a bit odd, but once you've done it once or twice, maybe if you feel like you're totally lost, then maybe scrap the project, start from the first video again, build a new project and just do everything one more time, and I promise it'll make a lot more sense. I actually had to do this 2 or maybe even 3 times before I really started to understand how it all played together. The main point of this video is actually to understand how important the naming conventions are and to see how much functionality CakePHP gives you. So by adhering to this naming convention, we could create an entire application. I mean, sure, we can just manipulate with data, but we have an application, and writing this in pure PHP from the bottom up would take a lot longer. So remember the naming convention, remember what it gives you if you adhere to it. So I hope you liked the video, hope you learned something, and as always, if you want to support, please throw a comment, a thumbs up, subscribe, or even hit the donate button in the description. If you have any suggestions, some stuff you might be confused about, you need some clarifications, have any questions at all, just throw it in the comment and I will get back to you. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.